Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs Daily War Room Update. I'm Maurice Hirsch, coming here to you from Jerusalem. We are on day number 122 of the war with Gaza, with the terrorists in Gaza. It started with the massacre on the 7th of October and has been continuing on ever since. Here's a quick just update of what's going on in Gaza. Some new information that's coming out just in the last really in the last hours. We're talking about the Gazan force, which at its start numbered 5 different divisions. That's Hamas divisions, terrorist organization, had very clear military formation, 5 different divisions. Of them, 4 of them have been destroyed. They had 24 battalions. Of them, 20 have been destroyed. This is mostly in the northern Gaza Strip and in the central Gaza Strip. Really, the main forces remaining are in the area that the IDF is working and operating in at the moment in Khan Yunis, and is really expanding its control of Khan Yunis on an hourly basis, and in Rafah, the area on the southern part of the Gaza Strip that is adjacent to Egypt. That really is the bigger picture there. That's what we're seeing. Hamas is continuing on with its efforts to show at least the semblance of control. It has policemen out on the street in their blue uniforms, acting as if they are the ones in control. Really, they are not. The Hamas forces have taken a tremendous hit. Of the 40,000 strong force that it was estimated that they started with, the estimate now is that they are left with less than 6,000 soldiers, really, terrorists who are fighting that battle. Of their tremendous rocket arsenal, they're left with less than 1,000 rockets. Now, every one of these rockets can potentially kill dozens of people, so we can't underestimate the severity of that. But from the start of almost 15,000 rockets to less than 1,000, that is one of these substantial really benefits that have been gained from the war that's going on in the ground. What we're seeing also in Gaza today is claims from UNRWA, the terrorist organization, or the organization that terrorists had so entirely infiltrated. 13 of its members participating in the massacre itself, another 1,200 members of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad who were simultaneously employees of UNRWA, and another 50% of those employees who were first-degree relations to UNRWA employees. So we're really seeing a massive scale of penetration and infiltration of Hamas into UNRWA. UNRWA today making claims that one of their support and humanitarian vehicles was actually attacked by IDF forces. That could be something which is something still developing at the moment, something that definitely needs to be investigated. All of these humanitarian goods that are going into Israel, into Gaza, are going in because Israel has agreed to allow them in. And so it would seem counterintuitive that Israel would allow them to go in and then attack them, unless, of course, as we've seen from many of the pictures recently, Hamas had commandeered all of that humanitarian aid and was then going to use it for their own military operations. But again, this is all speculation. These are claims that are being made at the moment, and really no one knows to really address what's going on there. In the north, we're carrying on with the war of attrition. Hezbollah, since the day after the massacre, since the 8th of October, has been attacking Israel and Israel's north. Thousands of rockets have been fired and anti-tank missiles have been fired by Hezbollah, somewhere in the region already of over 2,000 rockets and anti-tank missiles. That's a full-on war. We're just not calling it a war yet, for whatever reason that may be. The Houthis in the south, another Iranian proxy, are suffering again losses today, with reports of more attacks by the international coalition led by the US and Great Britain, with some 40 Houthis reportedly being killed. In Judea and Samaria, unfortunately, we started the day with a terrorist attack. A 16-year-old taking a knife in a situation that we've seen all too often, and in an attempt to murder Israelis. He's then shot in self-defense by the Israeli security forces. the Palestinian Authority immediately declaring that he was subject to, excuse me, to extrajudicial killings. Really, this is an imminent attack being carried out by an armed terrorist, and really the height of self-defense. But in the war of propaganda, the Palestinian Authority's war of propaganda, the truth doesn't really matter. Facts are irrelevant. It's only the story that you tell the world. And so in Israel today, we've had relative calm, I have to say. No substantial terrorist attacks being reported. There is constant friction in Jerusalem, which is why I say no substantial terror attacks. And there are sporadic attacks that are carried out, but that's something which really doesn't worth noting at the moment. What we're going to discuss today is the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas within that. I'm joined for that purpose by my esteemed guest, Khaled Abu Toameh, an award-winning journalist, a senior fellow of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, a senior distinguished fellow of the Gatestone Institute, also really one of these driving forces behind understanding and really presenting to the world what's going on in the Palestinian Authority. So what we're going to discuss today is Khaled, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Firstly, what we're going to discuss today is this. We're in this really interesting period of Palestinian history. It's an interesting month in that if you take from the 9th of January 2005, when Mahmoud Abbas was elected, the last elections, he's now in his 20th year of a 4-year term. A year later, elections for the Palestinian parliament won by Hamas, 74 seats out of the 132 seats in the parliament. And since then, democracy is dead. Democracy in the Palestinian Authority is dead. There's been no elections for the president, no elections for the parliament. And now we're looking at this aging dictator, Mahmoud Abbas, with the Americans pushing for Palestinian statehood. Can Abbas be that person who leads the Palestinians to statehood?
You know, Morris, I covered Mahmoud Abbas's pre-election campaign just before he was elected. And he was traveling around in the West Bank, talking to different people there, even visiting refugee camps and villages. And I remember all the promises he made just before January 9, 2005. Yes. He talked about a new era. He talked about democracy in the Palestinian Authority. He talked about improving the living conditions of the Palestinians. He talked about peace, that he was committed to peace. And he also promised that he would improve the relations between the Palestinians and the Arab world. Now, here we are 20 years later. That was the last presidential election that was held. Since then, the Palestinians have not been able to hold any election or presidential and parliamentary elections. And we all know why. It's because of the dispute between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, or Abbas's ruling Fatah faction and Hamas. Not only that, not only has the Palestinian Authority under Abbas failed to hold elections, they have failed their people in many ways. And we haven't yet talked about failing Israel, by the way, and the Americans and the Europeans and others.
There's so many sides to the failure of the Palestinian Authority, internal, external, in the Arab Brotherhood, all over. There don't seem to be many successes.
No matter how you look at Abbas's term in office, it's a disaster. It's a disaster for the Palestinians. It's a disaster for the peace process. It's a total disappointment for all those who were hoping that he would usher in a new era, that he would bring something new, that he would actually be different than Yasser Arafat. What the Palestinians got under Mahmoud Abbas was not much different than what they had under Yasser Arafat. They got another autocratic regime, a regime where there's no freedom of speech, no freedom of the media, a regime that cracks down on political opponents and political rivals, a regime that does not hesitate to send Palestinian security forces to arrest beat and even kill
those who, in the case of Nizar Banat.
Yes, those who dare to criticize the Palestinian Authority, a regime that has failed in many ways to embark on major reforms in the Palestinian Authority in bringing about real changes to the Palestinian governing institutions, a regime that actually saw the elimination of Palestinian parliamentary life.
Yeah.
Since 2007, the Palestinian parliament has been effectively paralyzed. And in 2018, Abu Mazen actually dissolved the Palestinian parliament. And since then, he's been ruling by presidential decrees. So no matter how you look at if we are to sum up the era or the regime of Mahmoud Abbas, it's a total disaster. He hasn't brought his people closer to statehood. He hasn't created proper and transparent institutions. There are still many complaints about rampant corruption in the Palestinian Authority. He hasn't brought democracy to the Palestinians. You know, Maurice, today if you post something critical about President Mahmoud Abbas on social media, you go to prison or you lose your job. And there are hundreds of Palestinians who have already lost their jobs as a result of, their big mouths, I would say, for daring to criticize the Palestinian Authority or President Abbas or someone very close to him. So what we are talking about is a president who has just entered his 20th
year of his first 4-year term.
Of a 4-year term. And by the way, we also need to congratulate him because he just celebrated his birthday. He just turned 88. Now, if anyone thinks that at the age of 88, President Mahmoud Abbas is going to change or be revitalized, they are living under an illusion. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Mahmoud Abbas had 20 years to change. He had 20 years to improve the living conditions of his people, to bring them democracy, to end the anarchy and lawlessness among the Palestinians. He failed to do that. He had 20 years to negotiate with Israel, to try to relaunch the peace process, to prove that he is different than Yasser Arafat. He never seized that opportunity. In that sense, this is a failed leader, and he will always be remembered by Palestinians for bringing up about the division between the West Bank and Gaza. Many Palestinians hold him responsible for the split between the West Bank and Gaza.
And on that note, just a question: when was the last time Abbas visited Gaza? I think it was part of that electoral campaign, right?
Yes. Well, he was in Gaza in 2006, or I would say in early 2007. I remember he was there. In the summer of 2007, specifically in June, Hamas waged launched the coup in Gaza. I was there, by the way, and what we saw over there was awful. It was horrific. Hamas was dragging Palestinians to the streets and lynching them. They were throwing some of them from the rooftops. They were killing many of Mahmoud Abbas's loyalists. Since 2007, Mahmoud Abbas has not been able to go to Gaza. And you know what? In 2018, he even imposed economic sanctions on Gaza.
He cut off their electricity. The world tends to attribute that to Israel, but really there's even UN reports that say that it was Mahmoud Abbas who decided to punish Hamas for not reconciling, and therefore he cut off their electricity.
So, you're absolutely right. And so the question is, for many Palestinians, what is Mahmoud Abbas's legacy? It's,
So I have two suggestions on that.
Yeah.
I think Mahmoud Abbas has two main points that this will be his eternal legacy. Number one, as our friends in Impact SC have clearly shown, he radicalized even more than Yasser Arafat the Palestinian education system. He took the system that was already bad and made it even worse, really sending the Palestinian children, brainwashing them, sending them to die. That's his first legacy. His second legacy is the pay for slave program. That is all Mahmoud Abbas. He was the one who implemented and entrenched the program. He was the one who, on three different occasions, in fact, raised the salaries paid to the terrorist prisoners and the released prisoners. He was the one who, on 4 different occasions, raised the allowances that the PLO pays to the families of the dead terrorists. That is his legacy, wasting $350 million a year to incentivize and reward terrorism.
And you know, the irony, Maurice, is that even that did not earn him popularity among the Palestinians.
They still hate him.
Because if you look at recent public opinion polls published by the Ramallah-based Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, and I've been following these polls very closely. They're published every 3 months. And in this case, although I'm not a big fan of polls, but in this case, I do tend to agree with the results because I'm there. I'm on the street. I talk to Palestinians, and I see the sentiments. These polls show that between 70 to 80% of the Palestinian public have been demanding the resignation of Mahmoud Abbas. These are not small numbers, by the way. These are huge, and he sees these polls. It's not that he's blind to them. Yeah, he's blind to them, and that's why I don't think Mahmoud Abbas today really cares, by the way, about the Palestinian street. Mahmoud Abbas' strategy over the past few years has been survival, to hold on to power.
His own survival.
And the Palestinians, okay, they can manage sometime after me. I don't care what happens. And that's why he's not prepared to appoint a president, a deputy president. He's not prepared to share powers with anyone. Who are the decision makers in Ramallah? This is the question that many Palestinians keep asking. Why is it that 1 or 2 or 3 people sitting in Ramallah have a monopoly over the decision-making process? There is no parliamentary life. There is no open debate among the Palestinians. There is no council that you can convene, and you hardly hear of opposing views. We hear almost every week, now actually it's many times a week, about all these disputes that erupt in the Israeli cabinet meetings, ministers shouting at each other, and some ministers criticizing the prime minister and the policies of the government. And when you look at the Palestinian situation under President Abbas, there's almost no debate. He has created the impression that everyone agrees with him. And this is very dangerous, and this is very undemocratic, of course, for the Palestinians. Palestinians, they're sitting there, they're watching the debates inside Israel, they see what's happening, they see that people have democracy, they can speak out, whereas they are afraid to even speak out. They cannot speak out against the Palestinian Authority, and the Palestinians in Gaza cannot even speak out against Hamas. So this is the Palestinian situation. When people say, okay, let's move to statehood now, and let's see if I keep asking myself, on what planet are these people living? Those who are promoting the idea of a Palestinian state today. It's never been farther than this. Palestinians have never been farther to achieving statehood than they are today. They're divided. They can't get their act together. If they can't hold elections, how are they going to build state institutions?
So one of the things that I saw, clearly Abbas does have a tremendous ability to present an alternative reality. In one of the documents that I've been over and read was a 2017-2020 strategic EU-Palestinian plan. Right, that was the plan that was the foundation for all EU aid to the Palestinian Authority during that period. And the plan says, and I kid you not, that one of the non-negotiable terms of the plan and its implementation is democracy and transparency. And here you're saying there's no democracy, there's no transparency. We've discussed this constantly. There's no financial transparency. Even now, the requirements that the PA had to openly show its financial workings are being hidden by the PA. So how has Abbas managed to persuade the Europeans that not only is he implementing their plan of non-negotiable democracy and transparency, but they should keep on funding him in this situation.
He's very clever, Morris, because you asked a very good question. How does he manage to convince them to continue the funding? Because he presents himself as the good guy versus the bad guys, Hamas. His strategy has been over the past 15 or 16 years, if you don't give me money, you'll get Hamas. So strengthen me, otherwise you'll get the bad guys, and I'm the good guy. Now, what the Westerners don't understand, the Western donors, is that it is the corruption of the Palestinian Authority that brought Hamas to power. In 2006, during another election I covered, by the way, the parliamentary election, Hamas ran in that election under the banner of change and reform. That was actually the name of their list.
Yeah.
And what was their message to the Palestinians? Their message was, look, vote for us. We will bring you good government. We will end the financial corruption. We will start investing money for the welfare of their people. Their message was, Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian Authority stole your money. We are the good guys. Of course, they also promised, to continue the struggle against Israel and all that, but their number one priority, Hamas's number one priority back then was corruption in the Palestinian Authority. And that's one of the reasons why many Palestinians voted for Hamas back then. Many Palestinians were saying, well, we have nothing to lose by voting for Hamas, because if Hamas comes to power, there's anyway nothing left to steal. So let's vote for Hamas.
And yet there appears there was still a lot to steal. That's
Yes.
what they've been doing for the last 20 years.
Yes. So my point is that it is the corruption of the Palestinian Authority that strengthened Hamas over the years. Had the international community back then come to the Palestinian Authority and banged on the table and said, stop the corruption, get rid of all these corrupt officials, embark on major reforms, financial reforms, administrative reforms, get your act together, that would have weakened Hamas. That would have sent a message to the Palestinian public that, the Palestinian Authority is on its way to improving, that it will change. But Palestinians did not see that the Palestinian Authority had any intention of changing. And it is ridiculous to expect Mahmoud Abbas, at the age of 88, 20 years later, at the end of his term and the end of his life, to embark on real changes. Maurice, another point. Recently, there were reports in the US media, or I think it was also in some Israeli media, that the Biden administration is trying to replace Mahmoud Abbas as part of a plan to revitalize the Palestinian Authority. And
it would be perfect for Abbas, 88 years old, go to a spa, get revitalized.
In the Arab world, that doesn't work. I mean, when was the last time you read a story that said, a Palestinian, an Arab president or an Arab king resigned or retired? You don't have that in the Arab world. And Mahmoud Abbas is not going to let go at the age of 88. He's not, from the Muqata'a to the grave, as Palestinians in Ramallah say. But the point here is that it is unrealistic to expect a man now to change. It's too late. Now, I was talking to Palestinian leaders in Ramallah over the past few weeks, and they said that Abbas was furious with the Biden administration. He is living under the illusion or under the belief that there's a conspiracy out there to remove him from power. And that's why when Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Ramallah the last time, they intentionally, the Palestinian leadership, humiliated him. They had him sit next to Abu Mazen without an American flag behind him. Abu Mazen had the Palestinian flag behind. Also, they deliberately took photos of Abu Mazen while he was looking at the watch, with Blinken sitting next to him. It's as if, when are you leaving?
Wow.
I can't wait for you to go away. Go now. These are small signs, by the way, but they're very important. and they are an indication of the sentiment.
The disdain, really.
Yes, disdain, as you said. And had this happened to an Arab official, by the way, or an Arab leader, I mean, he would cut off all ties with the Palestinian Authority, because that's degradation. That's an insult to your dignity, and that's very serious.
But so here we have this Palestinian leader who really hasn't done anything for the Palestinian people whatsoever. He's really led them down the path of terror on the one hand and internal corruption. There's another organization called Amman, which is a sort of a watchdog that's also partly funded by the European Union, that puts out constant reports on the level of Palestinian integrity and corruption. Unfortunately, the integrity is low and the corruption is high. In almost every field, in the division of funds, in the division of resources, in who controls the imports into the country, who controls everything that's going out of the Palestinian territories. In every single way, there's another form of corruption. Abbas disbands the parliament and he creates a new court, the Constitutional Court, which now, I just read an article that the Americans are now quelling over this idea of, well, Abbas has agreed to reform some of the members on this Constitutional Court. This was a court that he created out of nothing. He's humiliating Secretary of State Blinken. Where does he think he's going with all of this? How can he believe that he's going to lead anyone to any safe port?
I think President Abbas thinks that you can fool everyone all the time. And as long as there are people who are willing or who agree to be fooled, why not? So, he talks to the Americans, the Europeans. He sees that they are coming to him. He sees that they're negotiating with him. He sees that there isn't enough pressure on him to change. He sees that most of the frustration and the condemnations are directed towards Israel. So, he doesn't feel the pressure. And as long as he doesn't feel the pressure, he's not going to change. That's another reason why it's unrealistic to expect President Abbas to change when there's no real pressure on him. Now, one of the reasons, some people keep asking me, okay, so why don't the Palestinians revolt against Abu Mazen, against Mahmoud Abbas? I think it's for two reasons. Number one is he has a very strong security forces. He has a general intelligence, and he has a preventive security, and he has other intelligence agencies that crack down on people who dare to speak out. And number two, I would say that the fact that he pays salaries to civil servants and the security forces is one of the reasons why they're not revolting against him. I know many people who are on the payroll of the Palestinian Authority. They receive their salaries from President Mahmoud Abbas, and they are very critical of him, but they cannot express themselves. Right? So these are the two reasons why, in my opinion, there hasn't been really an intifada against the Palestinian Authority. Many Palestinians are disillusioned with President Abbas. They're very angry and upset over the corruption. But, as long as he's paying
salaries, they're not willing to do anything. They're not willing to stand up and say, where is that other alternative? You see sometimes in those elections, Mustafa Barghouti ran against Mahmoud Abbas. He received 5% of the vote, 4% of the vote. He doesn't represent really anyone. Isn't there another Palestinian leader who can come up and say, you know what, just on that idea of corruption, we're not willing to go anywhere. Salam Fayyad, who was the prime minister for a while, didn't seem to be able to make inroads there either.
He tried, and so did others, by the way. Salam Fayyad tried when he was prime minister under Abu Mazen. He failed, and I'll tell you soon why. Some people who dare to speak out against corruption in the Palestinian Authority or criticize President Abbas, such as Nasser al-Qudwa, a nephew of Yasser Arafat and a former foreign minister, and Mohammed Dahlan, the former security chief in Gaza. These are people who tried. Where are they? What happened to them?
Dahlan's running away after he was indicted and convicted in absentia. Nasser al-Qudwa was thrown out of
the Fatah Central Committee. And Salam Fayyad is sitting in the US after Abu Mazen chased him out, literally, and even seized his bank accounts in Ramallah, by the way.
Yeah.
So this is how you silence critics, and this is one of the reasons why Palestinians don't erupt against Abu Mazen. Now, Abu Mazen is not alone. This is something we need to understand.
Who is that circle of people around him who are enjoying his really tremendous influence and power? People like Hussein Sheikh.
Palestinians call that the Palestinian Authority Mafia. The way they see it is that there is this mafia sitting there in the Muqata'a in Ramallah running the show. And anyone who tries to come close to ask for his part in this cake, they bite him. They kick him out. So that's a problem, that many Palestinians view the Palestinian Authority leadership as a mafia. It's like, oh, you don't deal with it, you don't mess with these people, you get into trouble. And that's why it's a very close circle. It's a small group of people sitting there around Abu Mazen, first of all, denying him direct access to the people. He's totally disconnected from the street. And secondly, making sure that other people do not try to come close to Abu Mazen. Otherwise, they might whisper something into his ear that would harm their interests. Now, these people who are surrounding Abu Mazen, I don't want to mention names right now because we're talking about a large number of people. They have many economic and financial interests in all of this, and not to mention personal ambitions. So this is another problem. Problem number two, Abu Mazen is the head of Fatah. And Fatah has the largest faction in the West Bank. And Fatah is not known to be tolerant towards its critics. And Fatah also has the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades that are very
Which is
active.
a designated terrorist organization that's part of Fatah, headed by Abbas.
In the West Bank, we have the official Palestinian Authority security forces, and then we have a private militia of several thousand people belonging to Fatah. Some of them are members of the Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, but others are, moonlighting?
Right.
When you need them, they're there. Sleeping cells.
Cops by day, terrorists by night.
Sleeping cells. These are people that the Palestinian Authority or the head of Fatah will summon if he feels threatened. And as long as Palestinians see that this is a situation, that on the one hand, you have to deal with the Palestinian security forces, on the other hand, you have all these Fatah militiamen, most people are deterred. They say, why should I speak out? It's too dangerous. You never know who's the masked man who's going to knock on my door at night. And so that, this does create deterrence. So under the current circumstances, going back to the title of our talk, can Mahmoud Abbas lead the Palestinians to statehood? The answer is very simple. No. And you don't have to be an expert on Palestinian issues to know that it's no. It's not because the Palestinians don't deserve a better life or anything. It's mainly because one of the Palestinians' biggest tragedies over the past 20 and 30 and 40 and probably 50 and 60 years has been failed leadership and more failed leadership. Leaders that
It's that basic failure to have developed, even over 30 years, any type of functioning governance system. The courts don't work, the education doesn't work, the internal security doesn't work. Nothing of those organizations really functions in a manner which would meet the standards that would really warrant bringing in or creating the statehood entity. And for some reason, that's what they've sought to do all the time. Abbas seems to have positively chosen, let's brainwash and direct, incentivize and reward terror over building a court system that functions.
You know why, Maurice? It's called distraction. Instead of reforming the Palestinian institutions and instead of improving the living conditions of your people and bringing them democracy, you unleash a wave of incitement against Israel. Why? Because you want your people to be busy hating Israel. It's much better than if they come to you, the Arab leader, and knock on your door, and may God forbid, they might demand reform, democracy, and that's something you cannot offer them. So this is, something that not only Mahmoud Abbas and before him Yasser Arafat did, but it's something common in the Arab world, where Arab dictators, in order to avoid internal problems, always unleash this incitement against Israel and Jews and radicalize their people against Israel, so that there won't be any kind of discussion about corruption and bad governance. Look at the Palestinian Authority media, for example. You don't see the official media. You don't see any debate about corruption. You don't see any debate about power sharing or no. Everything's perfect. We are living in a utopia. Under President Abbas, it's paradise, and the only bad guys.
Israel's all evil.
99% of the reports and the coverage in the Palestinian media is extremely anti-Israel. It is devoted to delegitimizing Israel, demonizing Jews, especially in the past 4 months, by the way. What the Palestinian Authority is doing right now in the aftermath of the October 7 massacre is further radicalizing Palestinians against Israel. Why? Because if you are using your TV and radio stations to accuse Israel of war crimes and genocide and massacres, and you're actually playing into the hands of Hamas. I think the next generation.
You're projecting the Hamas propaganda all the time, every day, into everyone's homes.
Hamas is shooting. Palestinian President Abbas is inciting. This is exactly what's happening. And by inciting his people against Israel, he's actually strengthening Hamas, emboldening Hamas. So that's why I keep saying Palestinians need new leaders, brave leaders. You asked me before, where are they? Why can't they stand up? I said, people are afraid, or some people don't care, or they've been radicalized against Israel to a point where they are blind to their internal problems. And that's a tragedy for the Palestinians, by the way.
Is it possible, Khaled, when I look at the Palestinian Authority, I can go through every one of their systematic and really endemic failures of the legal system, the education system, the justice, everything around it, everything that would be really the stalwart of a proper functioning society and really governmental system that would possibly at some stage warrant even statehood to a degree. Is it something reasonable to request from the Palestinians or to expect them to implement? They've never known that system. They lived under the Jordanians from 1948 to 1967. The Palestinian Authority over the last 40 years, 30 years has done nothing to really imbue that democratic idea. Is it something that the Palestinians even want? Do they want democracy?
I don't know about this generation, Maurice, but I can tell you about the previous generation because I've been around for a long time. And I remember when the Oslo Accords were signed, I was talking to Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. And you could hear from them how hopeful they were. And what were they saying? Many people were saying, wow, finally we are going to get our own government, our own parliament, our own media. Finally, we will have something like what these Jews have. We will have our own Knesset. We will have a free media where you can write anything. You can criticize the president, the prime minister. Wow, we will have a government every 2 and 3 years. This is what many Palestinians were hoping for. Why? Where did they pick this up? They were living under Israel. They were exposed to the Israeli democratic system. They saw the free media in Israel, and they used to talk to the Israeli media, by the way. I used to interview all the Hamas leaders.
Khaled Shkaki, whose surveys are published, was publishing surveys back then, also in 1994, where the Palestinians were talking about really with great esteem the Israeli democratic system, the Israeli respect for human rights. Not Israelis telling them what they think, but Palestinians telling Khaled Shkaki what they saw and perceived.
I can confirm this because I've talked to thousands of Palestinians over the years, and that I've been working in the West Bank and Gaza. I never heard one Palestinian say, "Oh, we want a system similar to the one they have in Libya or in Syria." No, they all looked in that direction. And they said, we want something like what Israel has. Because they saw, I mean, in the good old days before the peace process, before the Oslo Accords, Palestinians used to come into Israel. Some of them lived in Israel. Many worked in Israel. Many benefited from the Israeli economy. Many were talking to the Israeli media. So they learned a lot. Even those Palestinians who went to Israeli prisons, by the way, they learned about the Israeli political system, about Israeli society while in prison. And ironically, some of them came out to be much more pragmatic towards Israel because they met with Jews. They talked to
not
Jews.
via the end of a gun.
Exactly. So, I mean, one of the debates that has been going on in Palestinian society is whether Israeli prisons have radicalized Palestinians further, or has exposed them to, or brought them closer to Israeli Jews because of this daily, interaction. But again, as I say, I'm not saying that Palestinians, want to become Zionists, and I'm not saying they're going to convert to Judaism and that they love Israel. But when it comes to the choice between the systems in the Arab world, dictatorships and corruption and all that, and democracy in Israel, I can tell you, even many Hamas people, even many Islamic Jihad people, and of course, several Fatah leaders I've been talking to over the past 30 and 40 years, they always looked at the Israeli model and said, this is what we want.
But then you have this choice of really evil or more evil. You've either got Fatah and its corruption and its terror promotion, or Hamas and its Islamic fundamentalism and terror promotion. How is it that those are the only two options that have really developed within Palestinian society? There must be, as you say, there's this very dormant group.
The third way.
That was a party that.
Yeah.
Salam Fayyad's party, even, right?
Yeah. First of all, sadly, I mean, the choice today continues to be between radical Islamists and the corrupt Palestinian Authority and Fatah and the secular group. Now, why is that? I think it's because both parties over the past 20 and 30 years have had a common interest in suppressing the emergence of new leadership. That's number one. Anyone who dares to challenge both of them is finished by both sides, either together or separately. Number two, I think that what has been happening is in Palestinian society as a result of the ongoing incitement against Israel is that if you come with something that is different from what the PLO or Hamas are offering, you will automatically be dismissed. We are talking about a culture where it's much more important if you graduate from an Israeli prison than if you graduate from Harvard. And when people like Salam Fayyad come to the Palestinians and tell them, vote for me, they don't ask him, about his background with the World Bank. They don't ask him, which university in Texas did you graduate from? They ask him, what did you do for the revolution? Did you go to an Israeli prison? Did you attack the Jews? Did you kill any Jew? If you say no, that no one's going to vote for you.
That's their drive. That's what they've been educated to do all the way along. And so you have all of this, really, this level of leadership within the Palestinian Authority, where many of them have been in prison. Some of them for ridiculous incidents, like Jibril Rajoub. Jibril Rajoub was in jail. He was sentenced to a life sentence. The story with Jibril Rajoub was that he was one of the great fighters who attacked an Israeli armored vehicle and threw a hand grenade at the vehicle. Unfortunately, it was an armored vehicle. He wasn't very bright, Mr. Rajoub. It hit the vehicle, bounced off, and killed a Palestinian walking along the road. That's why Jibril Rajoub was in prison for 17 years. For 17 years and was serving a life sentence, not because he killed any Jews, but because he killed a Palestinian walking. And you have
the eyes
all
of the
these
Palestinians,
people.
He's seen as a hero.
Mahmoud Abbas, Abbas's maybe deputy in Fatah, his claim to fame is that he was part of that group that managed to take 6 Israeli soldiers hostage in Lebanon back then in the early 80s. These are their terror credentials, and that's something which, as you said, that seems to be a requirement to move up.
You are given precedent, and priority goes to people who graduated or who were released from Israeli prisons. I remember when the Palestinian Authority was established, most of the senior jobs went to released prisoners, people who were released from Israeli prisons. And the higher the number of the higher the number of years you spent in prison, the higher your rank. Yes.
That's Abbas's pay for slay. It's not only paying salaries to terrorists in prison.
Long before Abbas, by the way, and Abbas continued. It started under Yasser Arafat, and unfortunately, it's going to continue. Nothing's going to change.
Could there be a Palestinian leader who will come up and say, you know what, I'm going to stop paying salaries to terrorists. I'm going to stop teaching the Palestinians to hate Jews and Israel. I'm going to work on building a functioning legal system, a functioning media that is open to different views. Is that even a possibility?
You know, Maurice, the day I find a Palestinian leader who will agree to say something like that, I mean, I would come here and tell you I have good news for you. So far, I can't find one. And even those who believe in these things are afraid to talk out in public, to speak out in public.
But there also seems to be no incentive, Khaled.
Yes.
If the US and the UK and everyone is now talking about, well, we now have to push forward this idea of the two-state solution and promote and really support the leading the Palestinians to statehood. Apparently, you don't have to do any of these things. You don't need democracy. You don't need transparency. You don't need to stop the hatred. You don't need to stop incentivizing and rewarding terrorism. Those are all the things that you need to do, because at the end, there is political gain. You can massacre 1,700 people, rape, murder, behead, and the discussion is, well, when is the Palestinian state coming about?
As I said, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. You know what? Even the timing of the talk about the two-state solution is not the right timing. Because if you are now talking about the two-state solution while only weeks after the massacre or a few months, you're sending the wrong message. You're making it look as if this is a prize for the Hamas attack.
Yeah.
The timing is problematic even. But again, I would say something like this. The last thing the Palestinian people want is another corrupt Arab dictatorship. They already have two corrupt, bad dictatorships, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. So you want to turn this into a Palestinian state? I'm not sure most Palestinians really want that, by the way.
In the last minute that we have, Khaled, unfortunately, time runs on these programs, at least for me. Abbas dies. He's 88 years old. He dies. What happens tomorrow? Who is now running the Palestinian Authority? Elections? Will there be?
No, election.
Fatah,
you can't
Hamas.
hold elections right now. I believe that what will happen is that the Fatah leadership or the PLO leadership will hold a meeting in Ramallah and try to reach agreement on electing one of them, a successor to Abu Mazen.
Another dictator.
No, it won't be different. It will be one of the people around him, one of his cronies. Now, if they fail, they might end up forming some kind of a council, a Politburo, to run the show. They're not going to consult with anyone, with the Palestinian people. They're not going to hold elections because you can't hold elections under the current circumstances. When Hamas is over there and the PFLP is involved and all that. These are the only two scenarios I see. But don't expect real changes in the day after Abu Mazen. Whoever succeeds Abu Mazen will be like Abu Mazen. I remember when Abu Mazen was elected and when he was inaugurated, when he entered office, he gave a speech and he said, I promise to continue in the footsteps of President Abbas. And he did. And I remind you, remember my words, whoever is elected to succeed Abu Mazen will stand there and say, I promise to continue in the footsteps of the great Yasser Arafat and the great Abu Mazen. And we're back to square one. This is what's going to happen.
Unbelievable. That's a very bleak picture for the Palestinians. And really, it has nothing really to do with Israel. It's more of the internal runnings, how they see their own society functioning.
Israel is not telling the Palestinians to vote for corruption or Israel never discouraged secular Palestinian reformists from coming to power or anything like that. Israel has nothing to do with this. This is an internal Palestinian problem, by the way. And it's the Palestinians who need to get their act together. It's the Palestinians who need to come up with new leaders. I mean, there are many other people out there who are good people among the Palestinians, but they're afraid to speak out, or they are reluctant to get involved with, with Palestinian politics because it's not safe, and you could, end up hurting yourself and your family even.
Khaled, on that note, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to have you here to discuss. I think we could go on for many hours, but time has run out, and as usual, we need to end now. We will be back with you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock Israel time. Thank you for all of our viewers for joining us every single day. Those of you that come every day, thank you. We obviously and we surely do appreciate it. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, you can follow us on the jcpa.org. There you can go into the link, the special Zoom link that's on our homepage, or you can follow us also on our YouTube channel. Click on the icon at the top, subscribe, and follow us there, and you'll be able to also enjoy the daily analysis and context that we try to bring you in the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs of what's going on in the wider situation around both the war situation and the political situation, not only here in Israel, but also in the wider Middle East as a whole. That's it for now. We will see you again tomorrow. In the meantime, keep safe, everyone.